Hey everyone, and welcome back to Story Deep Dive with Rachel and Dana. I'm over here playing it cool, like I wasn't just doing a tiny shoulder dance right before the recording started. I was like, I'm so sly, I'm gonna make Dana laugh. She's gonna be giggling when we open the podcast. And then I called myself out, and I went ahead and did it on camera, so now you got the pleasure of the shoulder dance. We are coming back to talk about characters. This is how you know we're recording at the end of the day, because the filter has gone, all of this, just, it's all the shenanigans. We are back to talk about the characters from Beverly Jenkins' Indigo. But before we get to that, Dana, tell me what's been going on this week. I didn't mention the agenda. I did it. I just seamlessly went in, and then you weren't ready for it. Because you were waiting for the cue.
No, it's because I was holding the giggle, and then it was like, oh, your turn. Well, one of the things that we were talking about before we press record is I've been doing this project with the students in DTW, which is Danja Tales Writers. It's a small community on school where we do Q&As, and I review writing samples, and that's where we host our workshops and all of that. And one of the things that we started doing as a sort of overflow of something I don't think we've talked about on here is our mutual dislike of Substack. Considering
our podcast is hosted on Substack, no, it hasn't come up publicly.
My bad.
I was expecting it to take that turn. Like, I knew where the conversation was going. This turn, I did not. This was like a kink in the hose. I wasn't expecting that one.
Y'all, this is so bad already. So, anyways, one of the things we started doing is doing live writes in the community where they watch me write with AI. And it is something that I am totally enjoying. I absolutely love it. However, it's always a but. It's somebody's big butt always in the way. Y'all, okay, so when I write, I talk to myself. I laugh. I cry. You can.
My favorite thing, I'm so sorry, I'm going to just interrupt so that people know. When Dana says she talks to herself, she is full-blown conversing herself to herself. So we have shared hotel rooms together, and they're the ones, where it's one room and you got two beds in it. And Dana also gets up crazy, crazy early. Like, she's basically getting up in the middle of the night early. It's like 2:30 in the morning, and I'm asleep. And Dana is doing her darndest to be quiet, but she is over at the desk in our tiny hotel room, like giggling and like trying to keep it in and like talking to herself. This is no exaggeration when you say you talk to yourself. It is some of my favorite memories of you are like waking up and you are like getting it, and I'm like half asleep and I'm like, what's going on? You were like over there in it, you've got your beats going and you are like jamming. It is my favorite thing in the whole
Oh my God. The first time we stayed together, I said, listen, Rachel, I warned you that I wake up early. I don't think you understood that.
And yeah, I was thinking early, like maybe 5 a.m., not 2:30 in the morning.
I got to get a couple hours before we got to do stuff. And so I remember the first time you pulled the blanket back, like, are you really up right now? Like, you was wondering, am I asleep still? Am I being punk? Because I had the lights off. Only thing you saw was the glow. Baby, I was on it.
Y'all, and you were getting it too. I mean, listen, you were in
I play music. I have my noise canceling headphones on, and all you see is me wiggling because you see my shadows and my fingers. Listen, as my husband calls me, the keyboard killer. I am tearing it up. And so I'm on this live. I'm writing this story, and y'all, especially if I'm plotting and I'm going back and forth, I'm talking to myself and I'm going back and forth, and then all of a sudden I just think, they can see me right now. Like, they're going to think I am crazy. I'm certified. But the story comes out so good. And I remember one student was like, I really like how you interact with your story. But listen, in my defense, I find that one of the things, especially when it comes to working with AI, that a lot of people don't realize, like your input makes such a huge effect on your output, right? That it is so intelligent, but when you have my reasoning is that if you are so intelligent, you have access to everything, then everything is an option. Therefore, it can pull from anywhere. So the more that you sort of refine and you're talking, so it's gotten to the point now when my GPT gives me back something and it's not the right thing in the chat, people be, dang it, Ash. Ash is the name of my chat GPT. He has a name. And they be, dang it, Ash, what you doing?
Get it together, Ash, what are you doing?
Come on. And he'll be like, my bad. I'll be like, get it together. And so, but what it has done has been so amazing, because I found that doing the live writes and showing people how to work with it better, and then having Q&As later in the week, have made it so that it refines the questions. It makes the questions better so that they can actually get better responses. And so it's been so good. But yeah, there are many a day. I was finishing the other day. When I tell you I was about to cry, I was like, Dana, don't you cry. Do not like
cry on this live call. Like, oh my God, this is amazing.
I'll be, oh my gosh, he's just going to walk away in his boots and his cowboy.
And your chat is like, you good, Dana? We okay?
He'd be like, we own this. We coming for the edges. I mean, come on, Ash. You ain't coming here to play. Girl, I be pumping ChatGPT up.
And you get him hype. For the record, like the unhinged stuff that listen, okay, do you know, like, when you're playing with a dog, especially if you had, like, I think about having dogs growing up, and my parents would be like, don't rile the dog up, because you'd be like, bah, and you get him, like, all, like, hyped up, and then he starts going crazy, and then he starts doing stuff that's like a little bit over the edge, or it pushing boundaries. You get ChatGPT so riled up that he comes back with some crazy old stuff, and you have to be like, wait, and then again, it's like you gotta calm the dog down and be like, okay, let's take a breath. We need to walk it back. You get ChatGPT so riled up, he says stuff that I never saw ChatGPT say ever before. I'm like, what is that? What?
Listen, baby, one day he was like did the man like this. I was like, okay.
You done got ChatGPT to be acting like me over here, throwing up the horns, and you're like, Rachel, when did you get in here? Get out of here.
And what it is so funny, and it's almost low-key scary, because even when the other day, no, that was this morning, he did something and did the little emoji smacking the head and made it a black emoji. So, yes. I would just be like, oh my goodness. And it's one of those things, and it's so funny because now, because of them seeing how I interact and how I get it to give really, really good outputs, if they don't start getting those good responses from it, they know they haven't given it enough information. Yeah. And so now you'll go into our things. You'll go into the community, and when it's like, look what he gave me, and these screenshots, and we be, yeah!
Yeah! Hell yeah!
Exactly. So it has been so much fun. And look, as we're getting extra out and it's cussing and it's a sweet romance, right? But so it's been so much fun. It has been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of hard work trying to stretch the story out, because we're still building and plotting. And so I've been doing that portion live. And then last week we finished the outline, and this week we'll start the finalizing of character stuff and the updating it because the plot is done and all of that. And so it's just been a lot of fun, and which I have found I love writing with AI. Just love it. It's so much fun. And but doing it so that you're able to demonstrate how to make a plot better and how you make it so be very colorful and vivid and emotional and still progress the story along and still guide. And so stuff like that, it's just been we've been having a blast. So we have a pretty nice size group of students that come out and watch every week. And so it's really dope, because we be over, listen, I over there talking to myself, I'm like, these people think I'm crazy. For real. Because I'll be laughing, I be talking, I be like, do I want to do this? I mean, really? Is that what we gonna do? Yeah, okay.
How long are those sessions usually? This is just my own curiosity.
2 hours.
2 hours? Nice.
We do 45 15s. I try to do 45 15s. But because I be trying to get to a certain place so I can end at a good ending place, sometimes I find like we do a break that maybe 10 minutes or 8 minutes. And then the last 10 to 15 minutes, we do Q&A.
Nice.
So if any questions, anything. And I'm also finding a huge benefit from it, because it's almost like this sort of, it's almost like it's reciprocal, because they'll watch and then I make adjustments and then they ask really great questions, and that marries with how I already think. And I'm like, oh no, let's try this, this, and this. And then when I try it, then I can perfect it. And so it's almost as if the questions and everything also feed into the process. So that's been really nice to see. Like, I've created some really good stuff as far as systems and structures, and helping them to be able to use AI for developmental edits and line edits and copy edits and things like that. That has been a lot of fun and also very, very productive. So yeah, girl, just living my blessed life over here with Ash and my students. Cussing Ash. That's what we'll call it. Cussing Ash. Which sounds like a curse word. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. He'd be like, Dana, this is so good. I'd be like, I know. He was like, you was not playing today.
Honestly, the introduction, I don't know which update it was where they started having ChatGPT use emojis. I don't know how to feel about it, but it sure does make ChatGPT's responses, particularly in conversation with you, 10 times funnier. Like, when he starts pulling out the the imp emoji, I am like, oh boy, something diabolical is at work here.
He'd be warming up. Boy, when that little devil emoji and the fireball come, I know it is on. I'm about to get all the good stuff. I don't want to leave my computer. I'm about to get everything before he be like, okay. I'm like, oh, you must be tired now. Do I need to come back later? And old sarcastic me, do you need a cup of coffee? Let me drop the cup of coffee emoji. Oh my gosh, yes, it is. And I think it's the emojis, but also, of course, it's the iterations. And then the last part is the fact that they've done updates on the memory. So you have the updates on the memory where they just had the actual memory where it saves. And then it also has the ability to read across chats. So the combination of that really does make it so that you can start having these conversations where I can say, you, based on what you know about me, XYZ, based on what you know about my programming or this area and what our initiatives are, what do you have to say about this, that, and the other? And we were in a coaching call the other day. I'm like, I don't know what we did, but what has it been, like under 2 years of it being like publicly, but I think it's something interesting. In the last part of that, I would say, I think it's a misconception as far as the accessibility being something that I think people don't realize how much it can make you a better thinker, of how you can, being able to explain something requires a certain level of understanding. And it may have an understanding, but you explain, well, but this is how we do it. And here is the process that we take. And this is our end goal. So with this in mind, so articulating that begins to make it so that you really can place it in the box. Like, this is our sandbox. Here's where we play. And this is how we do things. And it's so funny because we'll be doing certain things, or I'll be getting certain responses, and they can tell me different brands. Like, I would normally say this, but for this brand, I'm going to say this. And then because I always ask and tell me why, I don't even have to ask that now. Here's why. Because you like this, and you really want to do this, and you have this coming up, that kind of thing. And so what it does is makes it so that it really can help to not just streamline, but it can help you to really get to a place where you can articulate well and level up. So that and when you make sure that you do that, you're ensuring that your personal foundation is secure and that you're building upon that. And so it makes for a very interesting dynamic when you're talking about plotting and building characters and sort of going back around and making stuff that it feels. I always tell my students, you want it to feel like it's lived in. Mm-hmm. You want to make sure that you go in and season that baby. It should have your flavor and your fingerprints all over it. And this is how we do that. And so beginning to do that and then moving from that place makes it so that you have, girl, and I think it'd be feeding that thing some drugs or something, because it gets hype. Girl, don't get some, he'd be, this story getting good. But it is. It makes, listen, as someone who has been a writer for so long, and most of the time you're writing in a bubble, you spend the majority of your writing, career in a bubble. And the fact that as a person that wakes up at like 2:30 in the morning sometimes to write, or earlier sometimes, y'all don't have to wake nobody up. I can just be like, hey. Yes, so that's me and my, I don't want to say shenanigans, but a little bit is. It's a little bit like a shenanigan. What you got going on over there, Rachel?
Well, while you're over there riling up ChatGPT, getting him all worked up, I have been, I've got a couple of clients right now who are specifically, it's actually really interesting and a little bit hilarious that we're having this conversation during the characters episode, because I actually have, I've been working with a couple of clients who are in the plotting phase. So we're talking about, our small talk is about plotting, despite the fact that we're in the characters, the characters episode. But it's been really cool because I have a couple of clients who started kind of fresher at the beginning of the year, and they're working on doing some structuring of their plots. And what's been so cool to watch is the way that walking them through the plotting process is developing insights about their story in real time. Mm-hmm. So for my clients who are plotting, I talk to them a little, I kind of teach them the 4-act structure. I walk them through kind of, what it should be doing. And we kind of tend to do one act at a time so they can really focus. Because what they'll do is they'll build they already know kind of where the story starts and finish. They know their major moments throughout. And then I have them do all of the scenes for Act 1, all of the scenes for Act 2, so we can look at them, make sure that they're interacting well. And what's been so awesome is that in that process, we are able to catch pacing problems before they've ever written a word on the page. That's right. I'd like to have them, a lot of my clients like to write on the side so they can get a feel for the characters. The clients I'm working with now are newer writers, so they kind of need to feel their way into the story a little bit. So just abstractly plotting can feel very disconnected from anything meaningful. So we'll kind of have them do writing on the side just to get a feel for characters and backgrounds and interactions, and just to kind of start warming them into the process so that when they start writing, they have a better feel for the characters than if they had just kind of done it in the abstract. Some of my clients are very heavy plotters, and so that works really well for them, but everybody's process is that little bit different. It's been really cool because I have one client who's been working on this project, and we plotted his Act 1, and then we kind of started getting into Act 2, and we started to flag the problems of I think Act 1 is a little too slow. And he was like, yeah, I was feeling I tried to write some of the scenes and I was like, can we just get on with it? And I was like, that is a great sign that your reader's going to feel the same way. If you're writing it and you're like, oh my God, we're not even to the good, that is a sign that we need to adjust. So it's helped us to, kind of rework Act 1, and then we're, using that insight to develop Act 2. And then it brought one of my other clients, literally like he was in the same place where it was like act 1 and act 2, that really showed him like, oh, I don't have nearly enough detail. Like I didn't have as much detail about my story as I thought that I did. And so it's actually like we've kind of backtracked and revisited some of that world building that he had. And now, and we're kind of going in bits and pieces, but I'm starting to see it come to bear, and it's helping him make his world more distinct and more nuanced, and is helping his plot develop. And again, before, ever writing, he didn't have to write act 1 to find that out, sort of the hard way, which is okay if you have to write your way into it and figure it out the hard way. But this really, we're able to shorten that time by being able to look at the plot together and just say, okay, that doesn't need to be a whole scene. This is more like bookend material, or this is something going on in the background. There's too many scenes before we get to the inciting incident. Let's, pull these, we only need 2 of these or whatever. And it's really been cool to see how it's both helping them develop the story, but also catching problems way before we ever have to live in the mire of those problems and be like, oh no, what went wrong? So it's been really, really fun. And it's so exciting to watch writers have insights about their stories, because they show up passionate about whatever the story is that they have to tell. And so getting to see them like get reignited over it, because they're like, oh, like this is bringing me closer to my vision. And that's always the goal. I'm like, when they're like, oh, I think I want to make this major change, I'm like, okay, well, the question that I'm asking them is, does this feel like it's moving closer to the story that you want this to be, or further away from? So to help them gauge, is this a diversion? Am I letting the problems shape my story away from what I want it to be? Or is it getting clearer? Am I clarifying how I want this story to unfold? And this is bringing me closer to that. So that's what we've been up to over here. And it's been so good. And it's like, it's so fun and it's so satisfying, and it's been really good.
I want to say something about that. I hope you don't mind. First of all, I absolutely love that. I remember when I first started working with some of my long-term clients, and people would laugh and be like, wait, how do you do developmental editing when you haven't even written the story yet? And my thing was always, we did this in the beginning and would even do it over the course of creating the overarching arc across a series, laying out the stories. And one of the things that you'll find is that having a sort of preliminary understanding of who your characters are before you do that, and then giving yourself the room and the grace to, even where I always call it like sketching that out in pencil, right? And then going back and starting making adjustments and alterations to your characters, or even beginning to go back to your characters and ask them the tough questions to begin to fill in those gaps. Because what it'll do, much like when we talk about this, is like begin to have those nuances and depth to your characters, and it's going to be needed to support the story. And so that'll allow you to sort of shape and mold those characters to really becoming 3D. So having those moments. So the other part of that I would say is, making sure that you are saving those iterations, because sometimes when you're doing that and in the moment you're like, ooh, this was a little slow, let me remove these things. But when you're actually writing, you'll think, oh, wait, I needed that to be able to support something else, or to be able to lay the groundwork appropriately in Act 1 to support where you're taking the rest of that story. And the last part is like knowing that because it is in pencil, you don't have to do all of it. And I think that's the thing for people who are like, well, wait a minute. Because I remember when we go through and I'm doing that live and I'm outlining and doing scene briefs for the entire story, one student was like, don't you feel like you already wrote the story? And I was like, I kind of do, right? I kind of do. But what I've learned is that you don't really know the story until you're in the story. You think you know it. Yep. You don't know it because it's really not dynamic. It's stagnant. Yep. But when you are writing, it's dynamic because you have the side characters and the environment, and you have them drinking coffee and walking the dog and doing whatever, that it begins to move and do things, or you see things that you wouldn't have seen when it was stagnant. And so therefore there is a freshness. And then I can also take advantage of like those entry points and those building points, because I know where I want it to go in the end. And I have a better understanding of where I'm going. And so I find it to be, I love doing that. And I love it because I have found that students have less revisions because that first draft, well, technically I find that the pencil draft is kind of a first draft, but your first full draft is usually a lot more solid. It still needs work, but it's a lot more solid because you took the time to do that. And then if they're doing it in an environment where they're getting feedback, it's usually even better because we as editors can see what's going on in your head. Because you can see, sometimes I say, I was like, wait, you can't just do that. Where's the rest of all this? And they're like, oh, because then if you were writing that would have been 30, 45,000 words that you would have had to chunk and start over. So yeah, definitely. I love those sessions. I love it, love it, love it, love it, love it.
So good. Yeah. And that's just one more thing. And this is in particular for like newer writers who are listening. It is like standard practice, especially again, your first, I don't know, 1 to 3 novels probably, that things change when you actually get into the manuscript, when you are actually writing the thing. So, I have my clients develop a plot so that they kind of know where they're going. So mostly so they don't get lost along the way. And they, when they show up to write, they feel like, okay, here's what I need to write. And it's not just like, what needs to happen next? They're just kind of like wondering like where they're going. And the story wanders because it doesn't have any kind of guardrails on it. But what you see from the 30,000 foot view, we are looking at the plot from, way above, and you're seeing the whole. And what you see when you're on the ground, actually in the forest, right? You're actually looking at things in details and you're beginning to experience them in the writing. That's likely going to shift some things. And that's, like, it's not just okay, it's standard, it's normal to the process, because that's what happens when you toggle perspective like that. When you're up high, you see things from a certain perspective, but once you get down into the writing, so much more insight comes to you. But you're helped tremendously by the fact that you have a plot guiding you, so that way it doesn't you don't just sort of like wander all over the place and then you're just stuck in the forest and you die of starvation, right? Like you know where you're going, you have a map to take you where you're going, but then you get to discover all of these great things along the way. Even if it results in shifts to the story, you have that kind of personal contact with the shape that the story needs to take. So that's, so I think writers sometimes don't realize that that's really normal to the process. And then they kind of they get freaked out and they're like, oh, I got to read plot, or I got to, let the writing process, let it teach you what it wants to teach you as you're in the writing. And then at the end of that first draft, you use that to help guide your revision, so to turn it into that cohesive whole.
Yeah, and I will say too that I think I would say a couple of caveats would also be, number one would be paying attention when you're in those 1 to 3 or so of what works for you and what doesn't.
Oh my gosh,
you may find later that you just don't like it. You just don't like it. It takes away something, and sometimes it does. And so I'm always big on what did you learn about yourself as a writer for this particular book? And then when you go into the next one, you refine because you go into it with that knowledge. The other thing I will say is if you're a person who, if you are working in the capacity with someone that you are working with them while you write, it makes for a better coaching experience because it's easy to be supported when we understand what the heck is going on, right?
Yeah.
And so when you are so therefore someone who is just doing it on their own, they may not do it as a standard practice, but sometimes because you don't do it is why you have so many drafts, right? Because you didn't just stop for a second and sort of just gather your thoughts and then move forward. The final thing I would say would be, if you are a person that is more of a pantser or a discovery writer, then the way this looks for you may be totally different. It may be super lean. And so the question that I always ask my clients is what is the bare minimum that you need to be able to write and feel confident about what you are going into? And so that may be that you just know the summaries for your acts, or you just know the beginning, end, and middle point, right? And things like that. And understanding that and being and communicating that so that you get the kind of support that you need so that we can help you be a better version or help you get over this hump. Or it may be that you need to try some hybrid approach because this is why you haven't finished a novel, right? Yeah. Because you haven't explored those different things. And I think even though right now, like as we're having this conversation, it's like, oh my God, we're about to talk about characters. We are. But I think one of the things that makes this conversation so interesting is that you can be talking about plot, but a lot of times understanding your plot is how you get to the true essence of your characters.
Yep.
That a lot of times in our minds, we may see a scene in a moment, but those scenes and those moments are usually only as powerful because it's about how it makes those characters change or discover something about themselves or how it pushes them to be a different version of themselves. And so utilizing those moments is how you begin to have the moments like this story that have characters that for me has been with me almost 30 years of my life, right? And I still read this book almost a couple times every year for 30 years. So this says a lot. And so I would say like taking that into consideration and bringing that to the table. And then as you are discovering who you are in the dynamics of as you're writing, paying attention to that and using that to help you make iterations to make your future books even better and that writing process more engaging and fun, and that you're talking to the book and they're talking to the book, the readers are, and it makes all of it sort of come together. And so that the experience becomes a just as good as, if not better than, the completion.
Yeah. And that's I'll before we move on, the last thing I'll say, and I have to remind my clients of this because it's easy to forget, and I like to remind anybody and everybody who will listen of this fact of like, those first several novels that you're writing, you are discovering your own creative process, which means it's going to be some trial and error, and and it's just if you know that going into the novel writing process, it takes some of the Sturm and Drang out of it because it's that there's going to be a little bit of like, you're not going to perfect it right away where you're like, oh, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to write, it's going to be a little bit of self-discovery of how you work and how you like to write and what works for you, and to know that, so that way you don't get annoyed when you try something and it feels like, oh, I didn't like this, I didn't enjoy doing it this way, and you can just kind of show up to that process and know that it is going to be like a self-discovery process along the way of writing the novel. And so you're not surprised when you sit down and you have, an unproductive session, and then you have to ask, okay, why didn't that work for me? Like, what about this doesn't work for me?
Even though I believe you can do it without having unproductive sessions. You may not do as much as you want to get done, but if you take something important or that can help you in the next one, it can still be productive. It just is a little different than you pictured it in your mind. Listen, we have all those days. We have those days often.
Yes. We have those days. We can attest. We have those days. Okay, let me launch us into our character discussion. So last week I made the mistake of being like, Dana, what are we talking about this week? And then I was like, oh, we should have done the summary first because that would have helped. So Dana, can you hit me with a summary of Beverly Jenkins, Indigo, and then we'll move on to our topics.
I swear Rachel be trying to call me out. She the one changed the agenda, okay? She did it.
I take full responsibility for the fact that it seemed like this seemed so logical of like, tell me what we're going to talk about, then we'll go into the summary and then we'll talk the topic. And then in practice, it wasn't. It's okay. I'd like to apologize to the listeners, to my friends, to my family, everyone who was disappointed by the order of events in last week's episode.
Don't you apologize. Listen, no ma'am, not my monkey, not my show. We got to just let it do what it do. Okay, so let's go into the summary. Okay, so for the characters, at the heart of Indigo are two unforgettable characters. Hester Wyatt, a fiercely independent woman, scarred by her past but committed to the cause of freedom, and Galen Vachon, a powerful abolitionist whose charm masks deep emotional wounds. Their love story unfolds in a world shaped by danger, legacy, and social constraint, forcing them to navigate trust, vulnerability, and power from opposite ends of privilege. Hester's quiet strength and Galen's protective intensity create a dynamic that's emotionally rich and deeply satisfying. Their arcs are driven not just by romance, but by personal growth and a shared mission. This is a study in how character contrast, emotional wounds, and mutual respect can form the foundation of a powerful love story.
All right. Ooh. Okay. Well, it sounds like we got a little hint about what we're going to be talking about today. But just to kind of like to sort of set the agenda for a conversation, what are the specific topics you want to cover today?
I think, y'all, this is so bad because I just had ChatGPT write that based on my notes. And I was like, come on, chat. Okay, focus, Dana. I think it's actually talked about a lot of it. It's the fact that there's so much that we can talk about when it comes to Hester and Galen. But I think some of the things that really rose to the surface was the characters themselves. Hester's role as a conductor on the Underground Railroad, the fact that she's an ex-slave and that she is this dark-skinned woman who's single, living essentially alone because of her aunt's death in Detroit. So they're in Michigan. And then you have Galen, who is Creole, and he has French roots, and he speaks French, and he is a wealthy man in his normal life, but he is moonlighting, air quote, as the Black Daniel, who he is wanted because he is known for his antics of going and buying slaves and moving slaves, and they sort of have, like the summary said, this sort of shared mission. But I think it's one of those things that really just it brings them closer together, but it also makes them stronger individually. So talking about the opposites in them and how that makes them even better. Also, the things about them, I call it the sameness. It probably can be, I could say that better, but the sameness between them, the things about them that are similar that we don't outright see on the surface. It's the things that really cause them to be who they are, that sort of inside of them, that sort of in their internal. This story plays a lot with not just the dynamics of their sort of walk through the general landscape when it comes to being in the United States in 1850s, but also in the sense of their communities and the differences when you talk about economics, class, and I love when we talk about the spectrum of privilege, because there are so many things that can be same about them as far as their experiences in this country as in being Black Americans. But then there's also a difference there because he is wealthy. He is really wealthy and she is not. But she also does have some things that she, the fact that she owns a home and she owns land, and her aunt and her family did very well for themselves, being born free. And so the reason why those things, we want to talk about those things, because we can't talk about all of the things, but talk about those things, is because it really does make for very memorable characters, and not just memorable characters, but it also makes it so that the story is much richer by the layers that we find in them. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Awesome. Yeah, and one of the things I kind of want to highlight here, because we were talking about this before we hit record a little bit, is the way that Beverly Jenkins really leaned into the context to shape her characters, as in the relationship that each character has to the context. And whether you're doing historical, any kind of historical fiction or contemporary or fantasy, this is a resource. And we talked about this last week, where you use your context as a force for the plot, right? And to make your context matter. But then likewise for your characters, right? Using your context to help you design and shape who your characters are. Because just like you said, Galen and Hester are living in the same United States, but their experience of it is different because of where they fall in the social hierarchy, right? So Galen being a man of means versus Hester coming from a working class, a more working class family. Even though, I mean, she has a house and they own land. That's a huge deal, but it's nothing on the scale of Galen, right? But then how Galen as a character engages his context is wildly different, because he is someone of means and privilege, and what that, and so the way Hester has to engage her environment also, like, then, right, is very different from Galen. And it kind of forces them to see these different perspectives, because they're each coming from a similar context, but that's been so radically shaped by their experience of that context, if that makes sense.
It does. And I think, I would say kind of the way that we enter this story, Beverly Jenkins levels the playing field. None of that matters. She's a black woman conducting. He's a black man that just got caught and they tried to kill him. Right. And so the reality is none of that matters. The mission is all that matters. Staying alive and trying to end this thing that we call slavery. And so what happens is the very thing that would have made it so they wouldn't have ever crossed paths doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the best ways that you can begin to sort of have this moment of whether you want to call it fate, soulmates, that the universe helps you to find your person, however it is you want to stamp it. It makes it so that it brings about this story. But but in the same breath, we understand the stakes, because it's life or death, because he's nearly dead.
Yeah.
And her commitment to the cause made it so that she was going to do whatever, even if he was surly, to nurse him back to health. Mm-hmm. And his commitment to the cause was that he was willing to give up himself to protect the people he had traveling with him. Mm-hmm. And that commitment, even when we get to him being surly, grouchy, privileged, angry, rightly so, and we understand enough to get to know him, so that when the story is evolving and they're sort of peeling back these layers, that you're getting into those dynamics that I was talking about, of like those opposites, right? Man, woman. He's actually out there helping people to get free, and she's actually a conductor, ensuring that people have safe passage. The fact that he's putting himself out there on the road, and she's being challenged in her home town, but also because she's connected to this bigger network, and he's connected to an even bigger network, right? Because they all know about him. And but one of the things that I absolutely love about romance is the fact that you have this opportunity to see people do what they're known for and do it really well, but how that is even in itself a facade. Right? How he has this thing, and it's because he is passionate about it. But beneath all of that, the money, the access, doing good for people, showing up for people, there is a man who has been not picked, not loved, yeah, and is almost using his anger to navigate his existence. And then you have Hester, who is a person that she was loved and wanted. She was born into slavery, but her daddy wanted her. Her mama wanted her. They didn't want the circumstances, but they wanted her. And but then she came upon the circumstance, and then having an aunt that really was kind of, you rule by the sword. Like, she understood that you got to be educated, you got to be articulate, you're a black woman in this world, and you right, and it comes this very strict thing to where her world didn't have a lot of color and dynamics.
Yeah. Right.
Because of circumstances requiring that. And I'm saying all of this to say, I think it's very interesting whether I'm working with clients or I'm teaching classes, and I'm talking to people about developing characters, and people say, "Oh my gosh, you know so much about your characters." And I'm like, "How can you write a story and you don't?" Yeah. Right? Because understanding those layers and exposing those layers are how we begin to see them change, and how the reader can be able to say, "Oh yeah, they're different." And then that means when you're moving through that story, we're nodding our heads.
Yeah.
Because we already have come to that conclusion, because you're showing it on the page, but we're experiencing it. And so I think what we see here is that we see that greatness at play, that she used those opposites. The fact that the two of them never wouldn't have been in the same room if economics or privilege had anything to do with it. The dynamics between cultures when it comes to internal cultural issues, of the dynamics between skin tone and access. They wouldn't have been in the same room. The fact that Hester has the indigo stained hands makes it so that even though she's a person who owns her own home, who has her own land, and essentially really does have a lot of freedom, even if she doesn't have a lot of money, like monetary wealth, or I guess it would be disposable income or whatever, liquid wealth, that it should be a mark of freedom, but her hands would stain her as still a slave. Mm-hmm. And so in the dynamics of their world, they wouldn't even talk to each other. Yeah. But page 1, essentially, Beverly Jenkins strips all of that. It's like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. You're all in it. Like real world, it kind of reminds me of, I remember when here in Houston going through Katrina, or even going through Harvey, right? You start realizing when a natural disaster happens, it does not pick people. You can't get out of it because you got a little change, right? And I think that's what she sort of did. And what it did is it leveled the playing field, and it also helped both of them to kind of see where he can get a little ornery and she could get a little feisty, but underneath that there were some similarities, there was some sameness. And I think this story does it beautifully. So that was the sameness and the opposites. I will also say that we get that in a sense of how, not just leveling the playing field, but I also think that her deciding that in the beginning, having that forced proximity, that did a lot for us to understand the characters as individuals. It helped being in third person, but it helped us to understand the characters as individuals and how they sort of coexist before a lot of the external plot sort of takes off again. And I think understanding what they are like in those confines, the fact of Hester having to engage the community and the world and be his eyes and ears, and Galen being limited when he normally isn't limited. He has access to everything. And so it's almost as if those tables were flipped. And so it's showing how to be able to show those dynamics in your characters, allowing your plot to inform that, and vice versa. Because what it did is it made it so that when we sort of had that breaking point, without giving everything away, it wasn't even fully at the end of the first act, but when we sort of had that breaking moment, we knew fully well almost who we were dealing with, so that when they came back together, and it was under the pretense in which they would have normally engaged each other, that was not a factor. But Hester tried to use it as a boundary and as a wall. And that's when we begin to see how life has, like, almost like, no, you need to know you're supposed to stay over there, and I'm supposed to stay over here. And he's like, says who?
Right? Yeah, that man, Galen. It's like, I never followed a rule once in my life. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm not about to do it now. All I know is I'm getting you. You keep saying what you gonna say. I'm gonna get my way. And what we see, because again, this is a romance, how love changes things. Mm-hmm. And again, well, I love romance. And why this is my favorite romance of all time. I'm sorry. So yes, those are some of the big points. As someone, you've read the story a couple of times because of me, but lucky you. Well, when you think about the dynamics of these particular characters, I think I said that, I said he was Creole. The fact that he's normally, when he comes back, he's in his full self, right? Yeah. Dressed nice. All of that.
His eye is healed. He doesn't look all crazy.
Come on.
And she was like, wait a minute, he's hot?
Okay.
Oh, no.
Like, for real. Like, okay, I shouldn't be here. Versus when she saw him first, he was in a woman's dress and had rouge and had makeup on, and because he was conducting. And I think as a writer, it always tells me to be very intentional about first impressions.
Oh, that's so true.
Just like in meeting a person in this moment, right? For her to be like, no, if he needs a place to stay. And she's like, oh, like, I want me to hear me roar. And then when she first talks to him, she like, this joker. That's what it's like.
Because she's also confronted by the fact that she's like, oh, he's huge. And she's like, and there's both a danger, but there's also a like, oh, I don't know how to help this person. Like, I physically can't help this person because he's twice my size, right? They have a whole, there's a whole moment where she's like trying to get him to hobble down the stairs, and he weighs too much, and she's like, oh, trying to get him down,
And I think it's like, I find that a lot of times, you really can play with these things that can seem like, okay, well, because some people's like, well, why always in stories they're 6'4" or 6 something? Everybody in life is not tall, But I think a lot of times we play with these elements arbitrarily, but in this case, it's actually being aided to help or hinder or challenge the relationship and also the dynamics. Him being a big man and doing what he does, this is what intimidates people. When he walks in that moment, when Hester gets caught up in that little situation and he walks in that police station, everybody stops. And then when he throws down money, what you need? Listen, he ain't come to play. Okay. And so that's part of it. And like understanding and having those moments so that you really do showcase them. But I think in this case, because of the time and the setting, it's made so that even a man like that can be limited because of circumstances, which is the reality, a depth of reality that Hester knows really well because of her station in this existence. So knowing that about these characters and really embracing that and beginning to see what is beyond the obvious and what is it about these characters that make them who they are, and what are the things about them that they believe make them who they are, that they've got to let go of to be able to have this love that they say they don't want, but they need. They just don't know it. And I think this is one of those where it's such a push-pull, but there is such a sense of safety and transparency and trust between them. And that's one of those things that, having the ability to write those moments, having the ability, I love how Michael Haig says it, which is that the character can see, they can see each other's essence, the thing that other people don't see. And we see that, right? That she sees his passion and that he sees her, like her quick wit, the fact that she is such a strong woman, and he sees, and even when he just like sort of pins her with her code name, and he's like, you'll never be a Hester to me, like you'll always be beautiful to me, and she's like, no one has ever said those words to me because it's always been so taken the path of that she was if you, the person, always have to be the strong one, and never having someone that is stronger than you be strong for you so that you cannot, right? And she gets to experience that, and he gets to experience true love that has nothing to do with what he can give her. And that's not, now it does woo her when he gives her an orange, but he doesn't, like, his money is not it. Because she's just like, listen, he gonna just find somebody else to flirt with, and I'll just be out of here. And so, but playing with those opposites, playing with the things that makes them the same, playing with the dynamics that we as a reader can say, oh yeah, they're supposed to be together.
Yeah, well, and I want to break in on a specific point that you just sort of like touched on and kept going because there was too much good stuff to say. But I want to kind of come back to the wound and the self-perception, because I think something that Beverly Jenkins does really well in this story with, I think specifically with Hester, is Hester has this wound in the sense of self-perception, but Beverly Jenkins doesn't just narrate that to us, but she, like, we watch Hester get confronted by it in practice. What do I mean by that specifically? I don't think this is in any way a spoiler. It's just a character that is in the story. So Hester has this perception, and when Galen starts, trying to woo her, she's like, there are other girls out there, like, I promise, like, this, I am not the one. You're gonna have fun, you're gonna flirt for a little bit, and you're gonna get tired of me. And he keeps telling her she's beautiful, and she's like, eh. And she has this concept of herself that she's not beautiful, and it gets and we actually watch it get reinforced when Foster is like, take our Hester here, for example. She's no great beauty, but man, is she a good woman. I mean, and so you understand in that moment, and I think everybody's probably been in that situation, right? Where someone hits something that you are deeply self-conscious about publicly, and you just have to sit there and be like, yep, that's me, I'm ugly, or like, whatever that thing is, right? And Hester has to sit there and he says this publicly, because they're in a group of people, and he says this about her, and you have that moment of understanding, like, you have that, first of all, it gives you that gut feeling of like, oh man, like, low class Foster, what are we doing here? That's, but we also have that gut sinking feeling, because we know that that's what Hester thinks about herself. And so, and we see that this wound getting reinforced by her environment. And so we're not just, in the story, it's not just Galen being like, Indigo, I think you're beautiful, and her being like, nah, and then we just kind of watch this back and forth. We actually see some of the forces, like, that have shaped her experientially, that cause her to think this way about herself. And when we watch that, so it adds all the more, like, again, it adds that weight and that pain to one of those wounds that she's, or one of those, senses of self-perception that she's carrying, that Galen is just doing everything he can to knock down. And he continues to, like, re-emphasize it. And what's cool is you watch throughout the story, she begins to see herself differently. She actually, like, even, she has these moments when she looks in the mirror and she doesn't see what she used to see when she looked in the mirror. And that's a huge deal. And it has emotional resonance and payoff because we've actually watched her navigating that wound and navigating that struggle, rather than, again, just kind of having, like, rather than doing it by half. And it's just sort of, again, you're beautiful, meh. And you're beautiful, meh. And we just, and they go around in circles on it, versus us actually seeing it unfold and coming to understand it better over the course of the story.
Yeah, that's one of those moments where I always look for moments in a story where the lie has been reinforced as truth. Yeah. Right? And that at the end of the day, everybody's beautiful to someone, but nobody wants to hear that you are the one that they attach that thing to. Because it's like, yes. Wait, I'm not universally pretty, right? Like, it's like I'm situationally pretty. Is that what you're trying to say? And so to have that moment where someone that she was engaged to, and that she was that she considered a friend, and that she considered someone that knew her. And this is also one of those moments, and we see in Galen's indignation about it, and his rage about it, and his desire to get the person that tried to get her, right? Yeah. It's also what it's like. You see multiple things happening. One is to be able to counter that thing as in fact a lie. Also that you see that he saw her beauty before her. It's almost like the swan moment, right? The ugly duckling turned into a swan. And so you could, if you thought trope-wise, consider it that. But she always was. It's just she sort of suppressed it. And I think it's also that thing of like, again, environment, situation. If you are always trying to hide your true identity, wearing gloves, all this, you don't want to be the loud person. You don't want to be the seen person. You just sort of want to move. Yeah. And he's just like, no, stand by me. You gotta get it together. But no, I think that's absolutely true. And that is one of my favorite scenes. I want to fork Foster, but, and even her realizing that he felt offended for her, and that she was offended, but she was trying not to be, because she was trying to look at it half full. Yeah. Girl, and you know me, I'm all the kinds of petties and like, oh, wait, what? You know, like, I'm like,
you want to go there? Are you ready to do this? Are we sure?
Is that what we about to do right now? Okay.
Are we talking looks, Foster? Is this where we're going?
Be petty Betty up in there. But yes, and it's one of those moments where it's like, it's the perfect storm for seeing the characters in action on the page, but also seeing their characteristics and those things that are usually hidden on full display. Yeah. Right? You see the protective alpha champion, very, it's not even wit. His control of the conversation, Galen's control of the conversation, of trying to get the information that he wanted to get. You understand why he was the Black Daniel, right? Yeah. And so that's one of those moments where you begin to just like the true definition of showing in a story.
Yeah, and again, you know, the thing about that is you're leveraging the conflict to put your characters on display, right? That's right. So because in the moment we're in a low conflict, like the confines of the scene is low conflict in that, you know, this is a verbal slight that has happened. And so as in nobody's, you know, we're not blasting a shotgun. We're not, you know, anything like that. We are, you know, people who are ostensibly ish friends, you know, we're among kind of friends. And, but this slight, you know, something so simple as that statement hits a deep place, and it shows us something about Hester, the way that she struggles to respond in that moment, and then the way that Galen comes in and responds, and so you're, you know, it's a subtle conflict. It's a small thing. Again, it's on the surface, it's a small thing, but she leverages that moment of conflict to really showcase so much. I mean, it showcases Foster as an absolute goon in a lot of ways. You know, he's very intelligent, but boy, that he just woof. And Hester showcasing the kind of person that Hester is, and showcasing, you know, but it's that little thing, but using it to really tell us so much about the characters involved in the scene. And you know, last week we talked about squeezing everything you can out of, you know, your setting. This is squeezing everything you can out of the littlest conflict that you have. And it's not blowing a conflict out of proportion and making it over dramatic. Exactly. That's not what's happening at all. So like, you know, that's when we say squeezing everything out of a conflict or leveraging a conflict, we're not talking about launching into melodrama. We're talking about getting, you know, being intentional about that conflict and placing that conflict so that it brings your characters out more in the way that they respond to it, the way that they endeavor to handle it. And I mean, that is such a fantastic example of using your conflict to do just that thing, and doing it outside of having a moment of life and death states. We are in conversation among friends, and someone commits a faux pas.
Well, and it is life or death. It's just not physical, but it's emotional, right? That it allows, it basically it's asking the question: are you going to sit on the sideline of your own life?
Yeah.
Are you? Mm-hmm. And Galen says so well. This is another reason why he don't deserve you. I already knew it. I already knew he was dim with it, you know.
Yeah, and Galen from the get-go, he's like, this man.
Exactly. Listen, he was petty for all of us. He did as well.
And we love Galen extra for that, by the way, right? Because we see that Foster is ridiculous, and we're frustrated with Foster, and Hester isn't doing anything about it. When Galen steps in, because we are like, is someone going to, like, give
Smack
Foster a smack? And when Galen steps in and does that for us, for Hester and for us, we are like, thank God somebody has some sense in this room, right?
Come on.
And it adds to the likability of Galen. And that's, you know, so also when you're thinking about how to make your characters likable, or how to, you know, if you have a character who has some rough edges, but we should like them, these are the moments you're looking for. When the audience wants someone to step in, or when the audience knows that something needs to be done and no one seems to be doing it, having that character step in to do it is going to endear them to us.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, and I think one of those, and when I talked to Miss Beverly this past time, she told me she does not plot. And I was like, get the heck out of here.
Give us the tea.
Listen, she's like, she does not plot. She just writes. She doesn't want to know in advance what's going to happen. And one of the things that I think about these types of moments, that you can get even more from it, and you really are layering the very dynamics that we're talking about. The reason why they were in the room in the first place is because he wanted money. Foster thought he was fast talking his way into some money. Your loose lips is about to get you no money, okay? Because you talk about the wrong one to the wrong one. And so you see this is almost like it's this power dynamic between Airhead or
it's Janine.
Yes.
Yes. Oh my god.
I was like, this girl, okay, before she flipped the script. So I think it's one of those opportunities to be able to get the full use of your cast.
Yeah.
To be able to build a cast that has a sense of dynamic. And I know that there are so many opportunities to use things like archetypes, and I think more than anything, one of the things I aim for is like a balance, right? Having the presence of, and do you need to consolidate so that we really can shine the light on, so that it brings a sense of dimension. And honestly, it just makes for a very beautiful story with a cast of characters that stays with you long beyond the end of the story.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you know, actually, I love this kind of counter example of Beverly Jenkins, because we had this whole conversation at the beginning of the episode about plotting. And you know, that's kind of where we tend to start with writers, especially if they're brand new. But the reality is not everybody's a plot. And so, but again, you discover that, right? She knows this about herself. And so when she sits down to write, she's like, all right, I can't wait to find out what's going to happen. Right. And it's sort of similar. I learned from an interview with Gillian Flynn. I didn't get to do the interview. Oh my God. But if I did, whoa, my God. But anyway, I learned in an interview with Gillian Flynn that when she starts writing, she starts writing a novel, she doesn't know who the killer is. That's one of the first things generally I require my clients to do, because I'm like, we're going to plot this thing backwards. But she has come to discover her own process that she's like, I'm going to find out who the killer is on the way. like unthinkable to my like type A plotter brain, but incredible, right? So I kind of love that contrast, right? Of like, no one can tell you how to write your way. It's something you get to discover about yourself. And, you know, that's how Beverly Jenkins does it. And my goodness, does it work for her, right? Because you have these, I'm imagining you have these moments of profound insight just because the characters are interacting, right? And it makes me think of like you when you're like, oh, they did not just say that, when you're writing your own story, right? It's incredible.
Yes. But I think and I think this sort of like, it really brings it all together for us of that as we're doing this and using this as your example, I think the best thing that I could take away from this is something that we've been saying repeatedly in our previous selections is about having layers, right? Yeah. And in this book, we have layers that sort of extend even beyond them, because it is how they're seen in their community, in their immediate sort of community, and let's say in the town, in the community of being Black Americans, and then how they're seen in the country or even in their roles in a greater scheme, and also the fact that all the while they're sort of dealing with the external assessment of their personhood that's being called into question because of what's going on in the country. And so she's taking something that is this big, heavy, sort of meaty topic, which we talk about in the plot, and really distilling it down into, you know, love finding you anywhere and at any time. And the fact that you have this opportunity, you know, to walk in your fullness of who you are in any situation, and that the right person, your person, will see that in you, and really, like, instead of trying to force you into this place, but call you and like stand with you as you level up, and we get to experience it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and wrap up here. Any last comments, or was that everything? Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys again so much for joining us for this discussion of characters from Beverly Jenkins, Indigo. I've had so much fun just talking to you about these characters and getting to honestly relive some of the moments that as I was reading the book, I was like, no, what? Like, you know, get to kind of unpack what's really happening there. So, you know, lean into your context, lean into that conflict, use it to showcase characters, and you will be that much closer to having a multi-dimensional story. So, next week, we'll be talking takeaways to wrap up our discussion on Indigo. In the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a review, give us a thumbs up. Check us out at storydeepdive.com, and we look forward to seeing you next week. But until then, as always, happy writing.